Okay, make a note at 6 o'clock. Heidi is participating remotely.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve and adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second. There's a motion and second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Tonight Heidi won't be voting, so it's 6-0. Okay, new Wright City High School bid considerations. So Brianna's going to speak first. I'll let her go through her entire presentation, and then we can ask her questions. We'll follow that with Dr. Berger's presentation, and then we can ask him questions, and then from there, then we'll just have go from there. So but bottom line is, let each of the individuals get through all their presentations before we ask questions. That way, I think that'll help facilitate the meeting. Fair enough? Okay.
All right. Mr. President, Ms. Kolk is on from Bond Inc.
Okay. So this is just going to be a really quick update. It's a cost comparison between where the estimates were and where bids came in last week. So this is pretty small. If you can make it a little bit bigger.
I can see it here, so I think you're probably okay at that
Where-
size.
Can you tell me what the name of that?
Do
Do we have that presentation?
Yes, you do. Wright City High School presentation.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah, It's the very first. Oh,
The first one, and it takes forever to.
Yeah, sorry, wait for the internet's acting up on us a little bit. So waiting for a couple more to bring up, Brianna, if they will. Dave, not to put any pressure on, but we're waiting on you.
Oh,
No, I'm waiting on yours to upload.
it's trying. Here, Dave, you want to come sit next to me? You can look over my shoulder.
I'm good. It's
So you can see the board.
Go ahead, Brianna, so you can see the board.
Okay, so this top line here is what we showed in the last board meeting, I think it's August, with the last cost estimate. And then in that meeting, we had escalation, contingency, and contractor fees. And it was a little misleading in that meeting, because it grouped the high school, east, the early childhood center, and the renovations at the existing high school. It grouped all of those together, so it didn't really break it out in a way that's easy to compare to today's bids, or last week's bids. So that's what this does here, is it breaks that out by project. And then this line is the total from those estimates, and this is where the bids came in last week. The very bottom red line is that percent change between the estimates and where bids are. And so this goes through the high school base bid and East Elementary. And then this orange column here is the total for the base bid projects. And then these ones over here are alternate 1, which is the football stadium, alternate 2, the performance gym, and alternate 3, the baseball field, with the total for all the alternates. And then the very last column in green is the total for all of the projects that we have bid to date. So that very bottom, that 7.47% is where we are over where we estimated back in August. And so compared to the 40%, 90% that we're seeing in other projects lately, we feel pretty comfortable with that 7%.
Is that due to increased construction costs and materials, I assume?
Yeah, it's a lot of everything like that.
So
Is that your only slide?
Well, Mr. President, she has the rest of the slides that we saw from last
Thursday.
board meeting. They're more for reference, but
Mhm.
certainly we can pull back to them if we need to. But that was, I think, all that she was going to present tonight as new information.
Well, the bid sheets were in the, her PowerPoint, the actual bids.
And they're
Right,
mine.
and that's just, if you have questions, we can
Yeah.
pull it up and reference it.
So I don't have any additional questions. I think this, this is what I asked for last week or last Thursday. So this is good because it basically tells us by project or by, and it also explains, where we came up with our numbers and stuff like that. So although 12.57 is not good, the one thing I did notice was at the football stadium, we were better at 37%. But then we turn around and the baseball field was 53%. And so Chris and I talked about that earlier, and what I got out of that conversation was there was a lot more scope creep there, and I think those requirements were a lot more fluid. I mean, for instance, we talked about, are we gonna add bathrooms, we're gonna do this and that, and I think the lesson learned there is, once we, understand what our scope is, those what-if games seem to throw us off there on that baseball field. I was quite impressed with the fact that the performance gym came in, pretty much dead on in terms of, 3% plus or minus or whatever. So that seemed to do pretty good, so, but, that's what I had to say about it, so. Alice, you want to add anything?
Well, I just want to say that I think, we've known from the very beginning that the estimates are estimates and that we are going to have to change and make some difficult decisions. So I don't think it should be a big surprise that we're needing to do that tonight.
I don't have anything.
Alice said exactly what I was thinking. Things, we know the way the economy is right now, and so, I heard nightmare stories about, 30%, some projects from other schools, so, I feel like this, as far as estimates go, what more can you do?
Michael?
I do like this breakdown. I wish we would have done this a lot sooner. I think, initially, you assumed that it was far greater than what it was, but $5 million, not that it's nothing to sneeze at, for sure, but I think this breakdown would have been helpful a long time ago, probably.
I don't have anything.
Okay, so, thank you. So, Dr. Berger, you wanna?
Yeah, we'll get my presentation up, and I'm gonna probably, what's that? Yeah, that's it.
That one right there, okay.
Yep, please, and I'll probably go to the board if that's okay, and I'll ask Brandon maybe to step into another seat here so Austin can see well.
I got it on the speaker.
Oh, okay, very good. But I'll start by saying that I appreciate the board's patience through, 3 board meetings now, 2 special board meetings, and a regular board meeting that's showing due diligence. That does not account for the numerous phone calls, text, Zoom meetings, and a couple extra pre-board meetings with Mr. Jones. So I appreciate your due diligence on that. I think we're going to be able to bring this all together tonight. So I'll start by saying everything that we're talking about tonight as we go into the base bids assumes what we talked about last week, and I'm going to hit on this again, the $3.2 million in additional funding. Now, it's in your board pack, the financial analysis is there, you've got the executive summary from Stiefel, the 3.2 in addition to what we have committed to prior to. There won't be any action on that tonight. That'll be in December, that will bring, kind of a form of our intent to do that with a board motion. But keep in mind, if for some reason we didn't need that 3.2, we're not gonna borrow. We are not gonna go out and get that money right now. So, more to come on that. Base bids, like Brianna's presentation, more for your, just for a reference piece. Next slide, please. Okay, so the resources available, and this is where the conversation got pretty broad, but from the top here, I'm gonna kind of tell you if I've got a really firm number or if I'm being a conservative in that number, okay? The GO proceeds, that's a firm number. We know what we have, 43.9 million, okay? LP proceeds could be a little bit more because remember we went out and got 6.4 of that. So we could potentially take up just a little bit, but that's a fairly firm number. I didn't want to count too much more than the 15 million. Our Fund 4 balances, 2.2 million. We're in good shape there. So remember that's 2.2 that we can use towards this project, and as this year maps out, we'll at least increase our Fund 4 revenues about 1.5 million because we are pulling in 1.5 in ESSER dollars that went to operations. We redirected our tax levy to Fund 4 because of what we've talked about time and time again. There's inflation going on. We needed to do everything we could do to make as many projects in Proposition 67 and 25 happen. Fund 1 balances. This will be a little bit of new information, but you'll see I've got a 0 there. I'm going to come back and talk about that in just a minute, okay? As soon as we hit the next slide. Temporary investments, that's a firm number. That's a confirmed number from PFM, $2.1 million. That's really good help that we got from Stiefel, getting the market when the rates are low. We're able to actually invest that money at higher rates. I mean, things went pretty dynamic about that time, and we do have to get rid of that money in 3 years. And then the temp investments after 123, we've got projected at $500,000. Trish felt good with that number, but I think we could, it's a conservative number. So subtotal of 63.7, and then you've got additional LP proceeds at $3.2 million for a total of 66 million, 66.9. Change the slide, please, and I'm going to talk about that incidental that I had nothing in there. So I'm not using that on any of these projections, but we do have money in the incidental fund. And you probably have heard as a board for years, you don't spend incidental reserves on recurring costs, but you absolutely can spend it on one-time costs. But my trick would be, how do I get that over from Fund 1 to Fund 4? And as we talked about as recently as last Tuesday night with Dr. Blevins in the room, that's much easier after the new formula, Senate Bill 287, to get those dollars transferred from operations to Fund 4. So right now, we're sitting on $7.2 million. And that is at 33% reserves. And you might remember the board sets a goal for reserves. That goal is set at 22%. So we are well in excess of that amount. Every time you take $1 million, and let me give you just the formula, is if you took $7.2 million and divided it by the sum of your expenditures and operations, the 12 million and the 9 million for about 21 million, that'll throw a percentage, and that percentage will be 33.6. So every $1 million is 5%, but it's not. It's a little less than 5%. So being a little conservative again, I'm rounding up. If we transferred that to $6.2 million to Fund 4 to help subsidize the project, we would lower our reserves 5%. If we did that again, we would lower it to 5% again, and we would still be above the board-approved reserve balance. And am I using that for any of these projections? No. I'm saying that's another lever we can pull if we had to, okay? Okay, any questions on that? That's a little new information, but I think, I know we do that. I think that's why doing that ASBR presentation every year gets you really familiar with that and also with what you hear in your board development. Next slide, please. Okay, so the resources needed. Now we're talking about for all the projects, right? So this is a good number. Wright City High School, low bid at 49.6. There's, depending on what the board did, you know, because depending on alternates, that may not be the number we use, but that's a good number. And I will explain that in just a minute. East Elementary is a good number, that's an accepted bid at 1.9. And then we've got the 6.5% of architect and engineer fees formulated into that. Renovation of existing high school and renovation of existing administration. I've actually ticked that up beyond Bond's projections, and I've bumped that up to 12% and 10% respectively for those totals over there. Again, contingency, again, the A&E fees at 6.5%. Contract contingency for the entire package one at about $3 million. It could actually be a little lower than that, so that's a good number. Okay, and I'm going to touch on that again in my next to the last slide, I think. Permitting is a fluid number. So we know we've got some permits waived. We're still on the hook for some, and I'm still working on others. So I had a conversation with City of Forestville today regarding that. But it's a fluid number, but that's the big number, so we'll hope to work that number down. So that gives you a subtotal, and then it gets a little, you know, on alternates. Which alternates will the board choose? And I know you've had a lot of time, you know, over 2 weeks since the bids have come in, week and change, to kind of process that and get feedback on that. But right now, what I've got over there is, jump over here on Doug's lap, and the three alternates, I have the low bid, which was from Wright, and then I've got actually LCS's bid here, because if that's an option, then we'll look at that in just a minute. Stuck in there, but I've got Wright's bid over here. And then I've got, for the football field, that's also Wright construction again. I've got the A&E fees calculated into that, although I will tell you, that's a big number. So I'm just using as if we took all three alternates. We're not going to. So I'm being conservative again by pushing that big number in there. Total of 13 million on the alternates for a total of 73 million. And as I reported last board meeting, if you assume borrowing $3.2 million, you know, and I think that's where we were heading when Dr. Blevins presented that, an additional $3.2 million, it still leaves you with a $6.8 million gap. I actually reported $7 million because I always tend to be conservative on that, but 6.8 after we sharpen our pencil, okay? So that tells you to that point, we've got some decisions to make, right? So let's work through those decisions. Next slide, please. And I'll get out of your way a little bit. So it's gonna get a little easier than this, but this first slide works you through, here's Wright Construction, and I put them just across the board with all their alternates, okay? So if you'll notice here in this $74 million, there's two columns to pay attention to. Total cost of all of our projects, and then the high school package one is right here. Okay, so if you go across with Wright, all the way across the board, their low bid, when we factor in everything else, it's at $74 million. That creates that gap. I almost forgot to tell you something. Someone will catch me that this number's $1 million and change larger than on your previous slide. It's because now I'm using, in just this example, I'm using Wright's packet, alternate 2, which is a larger number, okay? So it's just how you want to present it, but I needed to let you know that. And then I did one other thing, and I did that like 30 minutes before the meeting. I wanted package 2 to be just a little bit more. So I was at 1.9 over on my worksheet, and I added 6.7 or 6.5% to it again because I wanted it to hit 2 million because I think it's going to get that. Despite my increasing the escalation, increasing the contingency, I just put 6.5% on it again just to protect myself a little bit more. I don't know if it'll be enough. Nobody knows. But I did get that number at 2.1. So you brought that over at 74 million. It's going to get easier, I promise. And then you just start breaking them down. Do you think you can do with Wright Construction, the low base bid? Yeah, you can do that at 49.6 and a total of $61 million. So we can do that. We can't do this, it's in red, right? Can we do right, base bid, and alternate one, just the football field? Yeah, you can do that. You got room, 53 million. Go across, 64 million. You're still okay. I'm gonna confuse a little bit here, but where am I at? LCS changes if you choose, if there was, the board's will was to make sure that we get the performance gym. So that changes the base bid because the sum of the two makes LCS the low bid. You come across, we can do that, but it's orange. It's orange because now I gotta go pull that lever. I gotta go to those operational funds, and it's not if I'm gonna need them, I'm gonna need them. Very likely, you're gonna get the 3.2, which for my purposes, I'm assuming, the board may redirect me tonight, but I'm assuming the 3.2 is gonna be something that the board is gonna take action on, and I think we have to work under that assumption, but I've gotta go get that $2 million and lower our reserves. So I'd like to have this more, yeah,
What's that number? I can't read it.
68.5.
Thank you.
Yep, 68.5. And so then right, and the third, the cheapest alternate, of course, yeah, 51 million. LCS and alternate one, the football field in the gym, you can't do it. Right, and alternate one, the football field and the baseball softball field, you can do it. And LCS at base bid, alternate 2 and 3, you can't do it. So let's get those that we can't do off the board, because you just don't have the resources to do it. Change the slide, please. Okay. So now it's looking a little cleaner. And perhaps this is where, after I present this, but it's the same information, it's just brought down without all the ones that we cannot do. So, as you can see there, you can do, of course, just the base bid. You can do the base bid plus the baseball, softball. You can do the base bid and alternate 1. And you can do base bid and alternate 1 and 3. I'll tell you why I've got it highlighted. And you can do LCS with the base bid, the cheaper gym, the lower bid gym. But I've got the orange light going, okay? We got to pull a lever there. So I do have this one highlighted, and this board expects recommendations. So I don't want you to think that if you didn't take my recommendation ever, for that matter, that I start puffing up and getting upset. But this board has told me all along we expect recommendations. So when we got feedback from the administration at the high school, and this is what we support too. And we just have given this a lot of thought, and we think this, the net gain of gaining a gym, even though it's an auxiliary gym, but still having to have our varsity sports potentially at the old gym, but a multi-purpose room, a weight room, athletic complex that will serve soccer and football, baseball, softball, all on artificial turf. One big factor in this is band. So you remember the history lesson there that I know the board knows is the band, which is Associated Performing Arts Center. Obviously the band wouldn't do a lot in there, but that group, the band has been good, and that they let us turn our cafeteria into a cafetorium. And because the number one priority for the band was the football field, because they want on that field. So before I get to my next slides, and I'm not asking for a motion, Mr. President, yet, I'll pause here to see if there are any questions, or if you want to make observations or anything, then I'll get to my next couple of slides.
Aaron, any questions?
Nope, thank you.
Michael?
Not at the moment, thank you, no.
None.
No.
When I was fudging around with the numbers, that's the one I came up with too.
You struggle, or we struggled, we beat it, we beat on it, we beat it, and that's when we have settled on. And I don't want to say it's obvious, because we have wants. We have more wants than we have resources for, is what it comes down to. Mr. President, any questions from you?
No.
Okay. All right, let's get to our next slide. So the administration recommendation, okay, this is important. So One thing to factor in here too, and actually, you know, if you would, just go to the slide before, is we had neglected in the bond presentation from, blame Brian this year, we'll blame Art. But there's an important thing to note that if you take out the performance gym, okay, if we take out the performance gym, in the base bid is the restrooms of this wing. But when we were trying to do our value engineering, we made the locker rooms and the concession stand as a dual use. They would support the performance gym and the football stadium. So when we pull out the gym, unfortunately, we lose the locker rooms and the concession stand. So what do we do in that case? You know, and well, perhaps the board's gonna say, you know, there's gonna be a motion second and approval for the gym, and then it's not an issue. If you do anything that deletes the gym out, we're likely, and kept the football field, we're gonna need to get a number from the contractor. So I would see that process playing out like this. Okay, we want a number for this wing, okay? And if we don't like that number, a typical kind of process is, all right, shell this out for us. You know, give us the shelled out space, but maybe not the metal lockers. We're gonna figure that out. We're gonna use our old lockers from our old high school. We're gonna do some things. We're gonna get creative. And, but you know, you probably can't shell out the concession stand much more. And then the alternative that we've talked about, to bond about, is currently the project has a storage facility at the football field, okay? At the football field. So what we would do is get a number, come from, originally from bond, that would go to the contractor that was awarded the bid, and say, okay, we're gonna update that facility to provide the concession stand and 2 locker rooms. And those 2 locker rooms would serve us until the gym was put back in. And then, right, Jim? Yeah. So, and when the gym's put back in, then we would convert that space back to probably keep visitor locker rooms there, which would be awesome. You know, it's always great whenever you can have your visiting team go to a different place than your home team whenever you're in for halftime. Perhaps a visitor's concession stand, but then storage. So it would actually, you know, it's going to be a markup on that facility. But I think that's going to be a cheaper option than that wing, that wing. So thank you for being patient with that. Do you have any questions on that?
So you and I talked about this a little bit, and we also talked about using local funds to pay for at least a concession stand. Can you talk about alternative financing for that, and how you would do that? Because, you know, if you don't have that concession stand, you're kind of like,
Yeah.
I mean, the athletic boosters are you know, basically, because, you know, they paid for that concession stand over there,
Yeah.
or whatever.
So I'm gonna speak broadly to it. I think I'm gonna get to what you're asking, but if I don't, you hone me in. You know, there are some things. You've heard me say throughout that presentation, I'm conservative here, I'm conservative here, I'm conservative here. So hopefully all those things play out where we got a little more money, because right now go to that next slide, Doug. Right now, if it kind of narrows down from the feedback I got from the board, from individual conversations, and from, you know, kind of where I felt like this was going, is you had 2 things in play. And if you have the base bid and alternate 1 and 3, you still have $485,000. Now, to be clear, and I know I don't want to be confusing and trying to create this clarity, I'm still not pulling the $2 million operational lever, and something else I was wanting to say there. $2 million. Oh, and it assumes the $3.2 million borrowing. Everything I talk about, that's assumption. I'm not going to, you know, emphasize it any further, but I just don't want the board to be confused and then make an action that they're not clear on. So doing base bid and alternate 1 and 3 leaves us $485,000. So there's
Which fund?
that would be out of the all those total proceeds that I showed.
Yeah,
So
would
we
be
fund
Fund
four.
4?
Yeah, we fund 4. So $485,000, and keep in mind, we get a little credit for the building that's already in the bid, right? and then we're gonna upgrade, so it'd be the net difference of our upgraded building. So there's that. Contingency is there for a reason. Right now, we've got 5% in contingency. We got $3 million, which on both these options, it exceeds 5%. So 5% is the standard for contingency. Contingency, if, you know, we get out of the ground out there with not being plagued with unsuitable soils, which we are going to experience, but how much, you know, that's what contingency is for those things that come up, contingency. So we do have $3 million there that, you know, we wouldn't want to pull that lever until later in the game to make sure that we were, you know, you wouldn't want to make a decision on that wing early in it. But obviously, Brianna's team and the contractor selected is going to want to work on the numbers sooner than later. But that's just the grind you go through. So those are some of the things. And then, of course, we could go back to that, you know, that operational money that I could get transferred over. It'd take me, I think, 2 years to get it completely over with, but that's the timeline on this project. So that is not an issue.
Well, and Jeremy did say at the board meeting that if we chose op 1 and op 3, then we would not do any new lights over at, and that saves us $100,000 in Fund 4 there. Is that the number you said the other day?
Yeah, and so after the board meeting the other night, I was looking at kind of the projections 2 and 3 years down the road for that 5-year facility plan. And there's a couple other things there for the high school as well, like high school doors, there's some downspouts, things like that. So there's an additional 50 or 100,000 more in like FY 25 and 26 that we're not gonna use because we're just not gonna need it, you know?
Yeah, I think anytime you're talking, now I think we're talking things that went more south than I anticipate, but you know, you can always pull another additional lever of deferred maintenance. So I know Jeremy's talking about the low-hanging fruit. Are there other dollars that we could push off for a year or two until we build back up our money in Fund 4? Absolutely. And we're not depleting our Fund 4. We're just going to run it down. I mean, that's what we put that money there for. Let's just start.
Is there anything that we have to do with the current performance gym to keep it operational for another couple of years?
So we just redid the floor a few years ago, so I anticipate, usually it's about every 7 years or so, you have to redo the floor. We're at the point on that floor where there is no redoing it, it's gonna be a pull-out. And so you're talking, when I talked to Missouri Floor a couple months ago, they're talking, you know, the $120,000 to $150,000 range to reset the floor and go back to.
We have an odd thing happening on it. We're actually having, where the plank is, it's actually breaking across the plank. So we could, and Jeremy and I talked about this, but we repaired it. What was the number on the repair this year? Do you remember 15,000?
Yeah, it was a little less than that.
Okay, 15,000. We could continue to do that. You would have to be looking for it to know we did it, you know. But the more we do it, the more obvious it's going to come. So it's got to be repaired, and when we have the 150 to throw at that project, we will. But we could push it off. I'm going to say 3 years very easily, even though he'll get nervous about it. And really, as long as you're willing to replace, you know, or excuse me, repair instead of replace, probably longer than that. But our intent is to do it sooner than later. That's a really good question, because you got to keep that facility to our standard. And when we put, you know, this wonderful gym in place, our standard is going to go up.
Dave, any additional questions?
Has it been discussed to, you know, in the packet it says that, hold on, I'm getting there, sorry. That just in the base bid alone, you know, we're gonna get the academic housing, practice gym, cafeteria, east-west roads, natural grass on the football field with fencing, natural grass on the baseball field with fencing, and gravel parking lots. Has it been discussed to possibly turf the football field?
Oh, you mean,
Just turf, no,
right.
no stadium, no press box, no none of that.
David, has been discussed, and certainly more discussed in the early stages of design, but as we kind of got closer to the end, we knew we had it. Now, I'm not talking, we knew we couldn't, you know, the turf, and I'm I'm pulling up the number, I hate contractors are in the room, if they weren't here, I'd be throwing numbers left and right. But say that's a $700,000 savings. We can't get all three projects, we can't come up with enough money to get that third project. So we didn't want to deteriorate or erode our other projects and still be with money on hand. And so we just held with the turf. However, anytime in a project, we can go to our contractor and ask about that, but that becomes, an issue.
And my reasoning for that is if you went with the base bid and all two, that way you would get your performance gymnasium, in my opinion, you would get your construction, your big, heavy construction, your building built and done.
Yeah.
And then you put in the turf on the football field, still give a place for band to practice and compete and whatever, and still, just like we was gonna do with the high school years or two ago. That was my opinion.
Now, whenever you're saying turf, you're saying real grass, not synthetic?
Synthetic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we didn't mix and match it quite like that. I was always probably defending against that because I thought that we were going to wind up with a facility that just looked incomplete. A turf field, in fact, that was talked about pretty early on, that we would do this turf field and then kind of build around it over the years. And we've seen facilities like that. Our athletes have played on facilities like that. I don't want to publicly, degrade any schools in our region, but there's always a vibe that this is never going to get done. Because you might have a competing priority in the future, and you never play on that turf field. You practice on it, but you never have bleachers, and you might know some of those too. So we were trying to, probably not. What can we afford? Let's get the most we can afford, but not get over our skis on it either. Not borrow. I'll say this again. I know you guys have beat this into me. Don't borrow against our operational money, our recurring operational money that's going to impact teacher retention or teacher salaries. And as long as we could bring this at a no tax increase, this is what we want to do. So again, and that's and also getting feedback from the high school administration, coaches and such. But those are all great creative ideas that, in all transparency, occurred earlier in the process than they did later.
I don't have nothing else.
Mary?
No, I don't.
Michael?
No, not moving things.
Not Alice, I'm sorry, Aaron?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Next couple of slides, I think, maybe just one. Let me take a look here. So, this was asked specifically from Ms. Halligan and provided it more clearly because it's kind of embedded in the financial analysis, and we would need Brent here to really, detail those things out for me. So I got this right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And so what are our opportunities for no tax increase projects? There they lay out. 2024, while this building is still being built or just completed in October of 24, we would have an opportunity to go out for $8 million, and so far, I won't read that to you, but, so we're in a pretty unique, and those are no tax increase issues too. That's not coming back to our patrons. That's coming back to our patrons and say, no tax increase again, continue the projects.
Yeah, but in full disclosure, when that happens, you're assuming that's when AFG's coming online for 24, 25.
This assumes no AFG.
Okay, that's fair.
So the AFG has not been in any of these figures.
AFG has not been in any of these figures.
No corporate interest.
No corporate interest either.
Okay, so, but the thing is, but you remember, in full disclosure in the conversation, with AFG coming online 24, 25, and then the uptick in kids,
That's true.
we may see in 24, 25, 26, we need more elementary space or something. So I don't want people looking at the slide and saying in 24, oh, we can go out for another no tax increase bond issue and automatically say, we're gonna go put a performance gym in.
Now, this is potentially for whatever projects the board doesn't select tonight, but there absolutely could be competing priorities, and seemingly that would be, elementary addition, possibly even acquisition of land for an elementary, although I think we have the land covered. But in some oh my gosh scenario that outpaces what Lincoln County or Troy or even Winsfield experienced, a new elementary that quickly. But certainly, yes, absolutely, full disclosure, there are always competing interests.
Yeah, so bottom line here is just because you see these numbers up there, don't assume that, a future board will use that capability to put a performance gym in or do phase 2 of the high school, but rather, it could go to an elementary or, upgrade to whatever. So just keep that in mind, and I think that's very important that gets
It
said
is.
tonight.
Yeah, well said.
And those numbers are based off, obviously, the 4%.
Yeah, so I wanted, also, another number we'd have to have, Dr. Blevins or Mr. Kinder here to extract for us, but so I said, what are your growth projections? 9.8 on a non-reassessment year, it banks double-digit growth on 1 year, and that's next year. And then from then on, it gets, our history tells us, and everything about our community tells us we're gonna outpace the 4% and 3% projections that they're placing in. But I'm telling you, that's calibrating Steeple to the board's expectations of being conservative. Because they'll go get you 10 million if you want 10 million. And there are school districts that are doing that. So we're gonna stay in those expectations that the board has set out and, be conservative.
Any questions on this slide?
Okay, slides, this slide. Yeah, so, that is it, Mr. President.
So, any other questions for Dr. Berger? Okay, now,
Go back to that motion slide just for reference. Yeah, one more, yeah. that-
so actually, Doug, if you don't mind, go back to the slide that shows our options. That has, that one right there first. So does anybody have any additional questions on this slide about, realistically what we can and can't do? Okay, and then the other question I'd like to ask the board is that base and alt 2 below, what is your comfort level of dipping into, basically doing the transfer of Fund 1 monies into Fund 4 in order to be able to do that orange at the bottom? So Aaron, I'll start with me. I don't feel comfortable doing that, just because I don't think, I don't feel comfortable with stretching our finances like that. So, I'm not comfortable with of doing that. So, just, just to get that performance gym. So, I don't want to pull that lever if I don't have to. Anything else you want to say, Alice, about this one?
What, okay, the 3.2 million we're talking about, where's that coming from again?
That'd be lease purchase certificates, additional
Okay,
lease
that's what I
purchase
thought.
certificates, yep.
Okay,
Yep. Bringing your total to, approximately 18.2.
okay.
Dave, any additional questions?
No.
I don't have any questions, but I'm not a fan of moving from operational budget either.
Aaron?
I agree with, you and Michael. We know we're gonna have big increases and, we know that as much as we continue to, be real, try to do as much as we can for our staff, we know that I'd like to be able to continue that. And so I'm a little hesitant on that, to move money out of Fund 1.
Okay, so next question to the board. So basically, it's that we could just do the base and none of the alternates. Is anybody want to discuss the potential of doing that? Or is that kind of like, no, we're going to do at least one of the alternates? Does anybody want to discuss potentially doing that option? I'll take silence as no. Okay. The
Well, I
next,
think the prices are only gonna increase, so we can do them at this point.
okay. So the other question here is, so I think this is where it gets interesting. So if you do base and alt 3 only, there's a lot more wiggle room in our budget. Or if you do base and alt 1, there's a lot more wiggle room in the budget. Versus if you do base and alt 1 and alt 3. So the question to the board, and I'm open up the conversation, is any board member leaning toward just doing one of the alternates? And do you have any questions about what that would look like? So basically, you know, just doing one of the alternates.
No.
Okay, silence is no. So by the process of elimination, we've come down to that yellow line of doing base and alt 1 and alt 3. So does anybody have any grave concerns about doing base, that they have additional questions and they want to challenge Dr. Berger in any way, shape, or form on the numbers that he has presented there? And then does anybody have any questions about that, whether you want to challenge him on any of those numbers? Okay, I'm hearing nothing there. So based upon all of that, then the question becomes, then we would need a motion for Wright Construction for base bid and alt 1 and alt 3 in the amount of 55,048. And the reason the number is 55,048 is because that's what we're gonna pay them to do those alternates. And then all those other columns come out of, the contingencies and all that are not part of that bid. So that's why you see 55,048. So does everybody understand why the motion reads 55,048? Okay. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Motion for Wright City Construction, base bid, and alternates 1 and 3 in the amount of $55,048,000.
Can I amend that to Wright Construction?
Yeah, Wright Construction, yeah. Wright City, right there.
How would you guys
Well,
like to move?
Michelle wanted to build it for us. Sorry about that, my mistake. Yeah, Wright Construction, I'm sorry. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Elizabeth, did you get that?
Yeah, I'm just copying now.
Do you have who made the motion and seconded?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? I heard 6-0, and Heidi did not vote.
Does Heidi abstain or just not?
Heidi, you want to abstain or just not vote?
Sure, I'll abstain, thank you.
All right, so 6-0-1, where Heidi's abstaining. Okay, so other than that, I think we're done. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? I heard 6-0. Thank you very much. Dave,
Thank
do you want to hang up that phone, please?
Yeah.